All right. Om Mangalam Gurudevaya Devya Matriksha Mangalam Mangalam Bhakta Brindebhyo Sarva Lokaya Mangalam Stapakaya Chudharmasya Sarvadharma Sarupini Avatara Varishta Ramakrishnaya Mangalam Om Stapakaya Chudharmasya Sarvadharma Sarupini Avatara Varishta Ramakrishnaya Te Namaha Om Sadashiva Samarambam Shankarachara Madhyamam Ashmadachara Prayandam Vande Gurum Paramparam Om Guru Brahma Guru Vishnu Guru Deva Maheshwara Guru Deva Param Brahman Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Om Bhadrakali Namo Nityam Saraswati Namo Namaha Veda Vedanga Vedanta Vijastana Vacha Sri Ganesha Sharada Guru Bhyo Namaha Hari Om Shri Bhuvaneshwar Devi Namaha Jai Ma. Happy to rejoin with everybody after a month break. We took July off. There was a couple of holidays on Wednesdays that we wouldn't be able to meet. So maybe we have a little something like a summer break. And so very happy to start where we were last. A few points actually just on when we are right now, not just what we did last month, where we are right now. As a holiday today, it's a very auspicious time right now. We're during the month of Shravan, a Hindu month, which is usually around July, August. And Shravan is a very sacred month, especially for Lord Shiva. Every Monday is sacred for Shiva. Tuesdays for Goddess Parvati. Many people come to the temple to bathe Shiva lingams and things like that on this day. Very auspicious time, on this month, very auspicious. Yesterday, we celebrated Nag Panchami. And Panchami is the fifth day, so it's the fifth day of the bright half of the month of Shravan is Nag Panchami, where the snakes and the nagas are worshipped. And actually, the Devi Bhagavatam, one of the sources of information about Naga Puja and Nag Panchami is from the Devi Bhagavatam itself, or the parent text, especially one form of the goddess called Manasa Devi, she's like the mother, and it's her son that stopped the great snake sacrifice that we told, that opening story at the beginning of the series of classes of how the snake sacrifice is going on, and the son of Manasa Devi stopped the sacrifice, and therefore she got a special boon to be connected to the Nagas like this. And in the Devi Bhagavatam, it mentions why her name is Manasa. Manasa means mental, right? Manas means the mind. So she's known as Manasa for three reasons, it gives. One is that she is the mind-born daughter of Kashyapa Muni, Manasa Putra or Manasa Putri, the mind-born daughter of Kashyapa Muni. She's also meditated on in the minds of yogis. So therefore her name is Manasa. The yogis meditate upon her in their mind, as well as she herself is a devotee of Krishna, as her Ishta Devata. And so she always meditates upon Krishna in her mind, therefore her name is Manasa. And it mentions in the Devi Bhagavatam, I remember because yesterday we said we have underneath our tree, or our Shiva Lingam, we have a shrine to Manasa Devi. We worship her in the form of the tree and some important deities that are there. We have a deity, a rare tribal deity of Manasa Devi under the tree by the Shiva Lingam here at the temple, where we do puja every year on this day. And I was remembering as I sat down to do a real simple puja, I was like, oh my God, what puja? I said, oh yeah, I remember. And the Devi Bhagavatam describes, first you do this, first you establish your seat, then you do Panchadevata puja, which means worship of Ganesha, Surya, Narayan, Shiva, and Durga. And then you invoke Manasa, and it gives her mantra like we use. And luckily I'm remembering all those details. And it said that the benefit of worshiping Manasa Devi is people worship Manasa Devi generally so that your children will not be bit by snakes. This makes sense, especially in India, where the number one cause of accidental death, maybe still now, is snakebite. It's a very serious problem. So fear of snakebite is very, very serious. But then it says the yogis meditate upon her for two reasons. One, for awakening of Kundalini. You can imagine the Naga symbolism of Kundalini is strong. Right, and for mantra siddhi, to awaken mantra and to make mantras living, to get the realization and the perfection of mantra sadhana. So we celebrated yesterday, and tomorrow Tomorrow is another auspicious day. It's Goswami Tulsidas, his birthday, his Advent day. He's the one who wrote the, known as the Tulsidas Ramayana, Rama Manas Charita, Manas Charita, I think. I'm maybe mistaken, losing a syllable in there. And he wrote, of course, we know him best as the author of the Hanuman Chalisa. So if you had chanting Hanuman Chalisa, it's especially a good day tomorrow to chant Hanuman Chalisa like this. There's a verse I often post every year on Facebook. I have to look for it and repost a picture, a beautiful picture. I think it's from a Krishnadas CD, the original, the first one we saw, the black and white. Later I found, I think, a color version of it, where it has Kali holding the sword, right? And then Hanuman is holding the sword, helping Kali hold the sword. It's a rare picture, right? And I remember Krishnadas would mention that Kali holds the sword, but Hanuman tells her just where on the neck to place it, you know. He helps her in that seva. And I'm remembering there's a verse, that the one that I'll post tomorrow, that says, like, this story of Lord Rama in Tulsidas Ramayana is to our mountains of sin, just like the goddess Kali is to the demon, to the demon Mahishasura, right? So we have the great demon Mahishasura, and Durga kills Mahishasura, right? So just in the same way, the story of Lord Ram kills all of our mountains of sin. So there's beautiful connections like that. Just holy days are important, and we're in a really holy time. And the next couple months, we have Janmashtami, and we have Radhashtami, and Ganesh Chaturthi, and all kinds of wonderful holy days. So it's a pregnant time. On Friday is Vara Lakshmi Vratam, another important holy day, especially celebrated in the South. It's it changes every year. It's on a Friday, during a certain Friday during the month of Shravan. I think the third Friday in the month of Shravan, I think, is how it's listed. And it's mostly done by householders. Women will fast and things like that on that day. We bring Ma Lakshmi onto the shrine. It's one of the important Lakshmi pujas. So on Friday, pray to Ma Lakshmi for blessings. Vada Lakshmi, the Lakshmi that gives blessings and boons. So this is very auspicious. So where do we left off last? Speaking of divine blessings and boons, we are in a beautiful section from the Devi Bhagavatam, where after thousands of years of tapasya, of the gods performing thousands of tapasya in order to get a response and boon from the Divine Mother, Bhuvaneshwari, she finally appears first as an infinite light, this Paramaha, right, as an infinite cluster of light, right, described as shining like 10 million suns, yet cooling like 10 million moons, with the sparkling with 10 million lightning bolts like this, right? Very beautiful description, overwhelming description. And they became very overwhelmed and became even blinded by this light, right? And then that light, and Nilakanta, the ancient or the medieval commentator, mentioned that light, that Paranmaha, represents also the Brahman, or the fourth state, the Turiya state, beyond waking, dreaming, and dreamless sleep. This so it represents the self, or Brahman, or the highest. Then that divine light, overwhelming divine light, cluster of light, takes on the form. The verse that we got to last week takes on a form of a woman, right? In the previous verse, it says this cluster of light did not have the form of a woman, nor a man, nor of a neuter. It says neuter, neither, or of combined, or neither, or indiscriminate, or indistinct. It was neither. In other words, it did not have a gendered identity at all. Then it takes on a very specific gendered identity. It takes on a form, no longer formless, but it also takes on a very specific identity. Let's look at the verse real quick. Let's see where we are here. Okay, this is the verse where it says, that light appearing now in the form of a woman, charming and delightful. She was exceedingly beautiful of limb, a maiden in the freshness of youth. This is where we got to last week, or last month, 1 month ago. And we talked about that part. She took on so it's a quick recap of what we discussed, right? This revelation right? This manifestation, revelation, or realization to the gods, presentation, a theophany, or encounter with the goddess, right? Shows is several important forms, several important points. One is that it's a female form. First, it was neither man, woman, or neuter, but here specifically female form, right? That means that this is, we briefly last time talked about, we use the term, the difference between theology and theology, right? The meditation or contemplation of God in general, or the goddess specifically. So this becomes a revelation of the goddess specifically. So it's the goddess as supreme, as Bhuvaneshwari. Her name's not given here, but at the beginning, her name is mentioned. They did prayers to Goddess Bhuvaneshwari. And the form that's being revealed is the classic iconographic form of Bhuvaneshwari. And actually, as these verses go on, you see I have various pictures. I've added pictures, primarily of various pictures of posters and paintings of Bhuvaneshwari Devi, right? Some of them will not exactly match the form, like this form has 6 arms. The form that's mentioned here will move 4 arms. I'm mostly doing this so you could see, since we're talking about the iconographic manifestation, the manifestation of the goddess in her form, describing her form, just to see different forms of the goddess. Because many of us, even amongst us that worship goddess, we worship Kali or Durga or Lakshmi or Radha. We're not that familiar with Bhuvaneshwari. Maybe we're not that familiar with Bhuvaneshwari. So to get a little flavor for her and to begin to make, because we're being asked, I mean, the gods are seeing her, and this is being described to us for us to meditate upon her. So we show some forms of her also, right? So it's very distinctly a goddess, right? The goddess is supreme. She is Bhuvaneshwari. Bhuvana means the world. It means creation. Creation doesn't mean the manifested world, the existing world, the universe, right? And Ishwara, come Ishwara means controller, ruler, lord, something like this, right? And Ishwari is a feminine form of that. So it's the goddess or the female supreme ruler of the world, Bhuvana, right? And so one of her names is also Tribhuvaneshwari. And there's a name for Shiva as her consort, Bhuvaneshwara or Tribhuvaneshwara, right? And so that means the 3 worlds. And we think of Om Bhur Bhuvasvaha. These are the 3 worlds: the earthly plane, Bhur Bhuvaha, the atmospheric space type plane, and Swad, the heavenly realms, right? So Bhur, so these Bhuvaneshwari is the goddess of the world, or the goddess of the 3 worlds, of all the 3 worlds. Sometimes even in some early texts, and these many books we read, and I'm sure this is the case with you also, we read widely, and we read whatever we can find, and everything we read, even if it's not exactly accurate or very sophisticated, sometimes very scholarly, is still part of our learning about the goddess, right? We're learning about her from these texts, right? So in early texts on the Dashmahabhijas mentioned that Bhuvaneshwari is the goddess of space, as in the Bhuvaha, Bhur Bhuvasvaha, right? But I've never found, and even today I double dipped into trying to find if she's described anywhere as a goddess of space. She's a goddess of the 3 worlds, including space, the earth, the space, and the heavenly worlds. So, but the point is that she's the ruler, she's the controller of everything, right? We've already seen as that Paramaha, the infinite light. She's the infinite Brahman, the self of all, the 4th state beyond waking, dreaming, and dreamless sleep, right? But she's also the one who is the controller, the Lord, Ishwara, or the goddess, the Lordess, if that's, I don't think we have the right, maybe I'm missing the right word, right, for the female Lord, sorry, the word Lord is a medieval government, description, right, limited in English language. She's the supreme ruler. She's the supreme truth and the personal supreme ruler, Bhuvaneshwari, right? We also mentioned in the last verse, she was young, a virgin, like a virginal god. We talked about that. She's independent. Although she is connected to Shiva, right, as a consort of Shiva, or maybe I would say Shiva is her consort rather than she's the consort of Shiva, right? We mentioned that a little bit, but still she is independent. That's the idea that you have when you have mother goddesses that are also young or unmarried. Sometimes they're showing that they're the independent goddess, right? And part of her nature being displayed or discussed in these verses would be her maternal nature, right? It's not only a feminine nature, but her maternal nature, right? She's supreme. She's the absolute truth. She's maternal. She's the controller, right? So let's look at some of her. So this is a realization. This is a presentation. She appeared to the gods in this form as Bhuvaneshwari, in this iconographic form, this form of a goddess, a personal deity, right? Personal deity. We are also, this is not exactly a dhyan mantra. Dhyan mantras we've talked about, these are mantras that describe the form of a deity, like meditate upon the deity in this way. Ganesh, like it says, like, or example for Kali, she has long flowing hair, a garland of skulls. In her right hand, she holds a sword, or in her left hand, she holds a sword. In her right hand, she gives blessing. She stands on top of Shiva, who lies beneath her like a corpse. It says she's surrounded by jackals. That's a dhyan mantra, and one should daily meditate upon this form of Kali in the mind and attain the 4 goals of life. This is an example. I'm summarizing the short form of the Kali dhyan mantra, Dakshina Kali dhyan mantra, right? So this is not exactly a dhyan mantra, right? There are texts that describe dhyan mantras for Bhuvaneshwari. The Sharda Tilaka Tantra has several important dhyan mantras for Bhuvaneshwari. The Tantra Sada also there's many important places you can find descriptions of her that we use in meditation to visualize. This is not exactly a dhyan mantra, but it is a dhyan mantra, right? We as devotees who want to meditate upon can use these verses to describe, it's going to describe her form. So we can close our eyes, or in our mind's eye, we can meditate, visualize, or contemplate this form, right? The gods in this story are not trying to visualize her. She's appearing in this form. There is a difference, right? And so that means, I think this is one of the things that we believe of the dhyan mantras. There's a couple different beliefs of dhyan mantras, is that the rishis in ancient times, or even modern times, had experiences of gods and goddesses, right? And from their experiences, they wrote down what they saw. Or here, a sage wrote down what the gods saw as it passed down. Vyasa wrote down or spoke, and then later got written down. It got passed down. And therefore, the dhyan mantras are compositions describing what the rishis or the gods or the ancient sages saw, experienced, right? So we can even do that. Now, there could be a modern example where Sri Ramakrishna saw the goddess in this particular form. So we can create a dhyan mantra theoretically from that form, right? And then the rishi of that mantra is Sri Ramakrishna, right? He's the one that first saw this form, right? There's a bit like that. So that's one view, that what they saw, they wrote down, or they passed down, and therefore we don't have to imagine, right, what the goddess looks like, right? Somebody saw her, somebody has seen her, or many people have seen her and described her this way, right? There's another view, is that what they saw is very much like what the gods first saw: blazing like 10 million suns, cooling like 10 million moons, tinged with red, and was 10 million streaks of lightning, right? Completely overwhelming, completely ununderstandable, beyond what the mind can comprehend, right? Then they catch their mind, bring their mind down, and try to have some way to experience her, when the actual experience of her is beyond conception, beyond experience almost. She's the experiencer ultimately, right? So she's completely overwhelming, right? Bringing the mind, so I sometimes described it to myself, trying to understand this. The sages from their divine experience bring the mind down many steps, maybe 1,000 steps. And then maybe then they bring it down and this is what they see, or they bring it down and describe in a language for next generations so they can contemplate that one which is like 10 million suns, including like 10 million moons, 10 million streaks of lightning, 10 just red, right? You know, something that's beyond, so something that's not contemplatable, right? They give us a language of contemplation, right? And so then you end up with this language and lexicon of iconography, right? Where you have she's everywhere, right? She's all powerful. That you have multiple arms to describe her all powerfulness, right? Or she's all knowing. You have multiple heads or multiple eyes, right? Or things like example of this, right? Or the way she's dressed because she's the mother, or she has large breasts because she's motherly and she nourishes everybody. You know, like pretty soon you end up trying to describe something that's by the actual experience is beyond description. You bring your mind down to describe it so that we get a hint. That meditating upon these, we know something of that which is not describable, right? So we can use that to meditate, to direct our mind, to stretch our mind, to focus our mind on the absolute and get a taste for it. Sri Ramakrishna was fond of using this term that God is the only thing that's never been defiled by the lips. Right, the term is uttishta, that when something gets touched by the mouth in Hindu culture, becomes unclean, becomes defiled, right? Swamiji, is it uttishta or uchista? Uchista, I think, right? Which, anyway, uchista means tasted from the mouth, becomes defiled, right? He says even the Vedas have been defiled, right? Because they've been described by words, right, and described by mouth. The actual pristine experience cannot be described, right? What can be described already many stages down, right? So that's another way of looking at these dhyan mantras as being, and maybe even a way of interpreting this whole theme. First, they see something beyond description. Of course, even describing this 10 million suns and 10 million moons is a way of describing something that's beyond description, right? And then they get either they experience something more understandable, even though it's not that understandable when you think of many arms and like this, right? Or it's being described so that we can think of who Bhuvaneshwari is. How do we contemplate the reality, which is Supreme Brahman and the maternal source and controller of all being, right? Bhuvaneshwari, Brahman and Bhuvaneshwari, right? So in pujas and in texts, you'll see this term ata dhyanam. Says now meditation, right? And it doesn't mean now meditation and we should, you know, it does mean close your eyes, but now ata dhyanam, now meditation means on a form, a divine form. And we meditate and visualize the divine form, but each of those qualities of that divine form have symbolic meaning or represent or give the mind something to think about, things that are not easy to think about. An example of this is of a Shivalingam. Shivalingam have many, many layers of symbolism. Many of you probably know many of these layers of symbolism, but one of which, especially the form of the Shivalingam that's shaped like an egg, like a sphere, like an elongated spear, that's meant to show as per text, right? Some forms of Shivalingam have other symbolism also, but the form of the egg form, one of the forms is that a shape that represents something beyond form. So it's a shape we can think about that allows us, that doesn't have an edge. It doesn't have an end. Usually shape has a distinct edge and end, corner to it, right? This is a shape it's a symbol. The shape of the symbol of that which is beyond shape, even that which is beyond symbol. Right, so that's an example. So many of these aspects of Bhuvaneshwari, we're talking about the iconographic description, maybe what they're saying or what the sages have written for us to contemplate. It's not only meditating on her form, but also on profound aspects of her ontological reality, her real nature. So we can imagine what, of course, we can try to imagine what God's like, right? And if we were to think of what God's like, if God has a form, we can try to imagine what that form is. We can be caricatured, oh, God is an old man with a white beard, that's become silly. People like to criticize religion as believing there's a God in heaven with a white beard. No text exactly says that, right? But you can see that people think, oh, that's true. We're just imagining something that has no reflection in reality. It's a thought to which there's no correspondence in reality, right? And imagining could be like that. Something imaginary means, we mentioned last time, means not real. That's one of the meanings of imaginary, right? It's only thought of in the mind, right? But not in actuality, right? So the idea of these Gyan mantras and the scene is that they're not imagining the goddess, right? It's a revelation of the goddess. She's revealing herself to them, right? What about us, right? This text is also not an imagination. This text also, if we take it as authoritative, as revealing from coming from the divine source, is also revealing to us, maybe not as direct experience yet, what the goddess is like, how to meditate upon her, right? And so Swami Vivekananda, we've quoted this before in other contexts, he made this comment that visualization becomes realization, right? So this is the difference between imagination. Of course, maybe there are just semantic games here between imagination and visualization. Visualization is just imagining something graphically, right? It's not just imagining the scene or something like that. You're imagining a graphic image is visualization. But you visualize something, he says, that will lead to realization, right? And that's a present. Ata dhyanam means now visualize, right? That's a quality of the tantric tradition, a not universal, but it's a big theme within tantra. Characteristic of much of tantra is the practice of visualizing a deity as revealed, not just imagining, visualizing as revealed. The gods, it was revealed in an encounter, divine encounter, revelation of the goddess. But for us, it's revealed through the Vedas, or here through the Devi Bhagavatam, Devi Gita, where it's the text itself reveals the form, right? Swami, there's a Girish Maharaj, Swami Shivatmananda, Swami Shivatmananda Saraswati Maharaj. He's the Acharya of the Chinmaya mission in New York, in Texas, and I think in maybe Austin, Texas, perhaps. Wonderful Swamiji. Many years ago, he came and spoke at Kali Mandir about a text by Shankara on the goddess, Inakshi Panchakam, I think it was, right? And I remember he made this, because it's also describing Shankaracharya in the text, if it's attributed to him, beautiful description of the goddess, right? And he says that the mind, the chitta, takes on the form of whatever you imagine, whatever you think about. If you think of your father, right, your mind takes on, and you can visualize your father, right? Your mind takes on that, the chitta takes on the form of your father, right? Or any memory, if your memory is your mind taking on the form of what you're remembering, right? So similarly, he says that these texts, he said that it's like tattooing. I can remember when he was taking the talk, Prakash was sitting next to him, and Prakash, like many of us, is quite beautifully tattooed with devotional tattoos of goddesses and Hanuman and Shiva and things like this, right? Our devotee. And he says, just like you have these images, divine images tattooed on your body, right? These texts tattoo these images on the mind, right? That the image, he used that form. I mean, not mention the text this way. It mentioned that chitta takes on the form, but because of proximity to somebody who was tattooed with a goddess image, it was a perfect example that we should tattoo these images in the mind. The mind takes on that form, right? Each detail of the form that we're tattooing on the mind, or contemplating, or visualizing, remembering the mind, right, is going to have, or has, so much meaning. They're not meaningless, right? Of course, humans and religionists especially are meaning creating and meaning searching creatures. So maybe there's no meaning originally, right? But we look for meaning, right? And we think there must be meaning, right? And so that's a tradition of commentary on these texts, is that these things have much meaning, right? They have symbolic meaning, they have cultural meaning, right? They'll have aesthetic meaning. And here, I mean, and we'll talk a little bit about this today with some of these verses, that some things they represent a cultural understanding of something extremely beautiful or extremely erotic or extremely maternal, that as Westerners, we don't have the same cultural background. We have different things that mean those things to us, right? But some things will have, they'll have use of culture and aesthetics, especially Sanskrit poetic aesthetics is its own tableau of details, right? It also has, some of them are emotional, right? And what's the term? I just lost the term. Something of the what did this is embarrassing. Young describes archetypes. Like, we now would maybe even look at these even archetypes of the subconscious or the unconscious. Maybe we can, as modern people with another back of tools of meaning finding, right? We'd be able to find some of the things, universal archetypes, perhaps, right? But there's definitely culturally specific archetypes, right? So we can see. One of the things we should remember, that I always think of it, is that the iconography, Hindu iconography, tantric iconography, is a language unto itself. It's a way of speaking about God, or the gods, about divinity, and it's a way of, and once you know the language, you can read images, you can read icons, you can read what she's holding. You can know what it means. It's like you can read words and know what they mean once you learn how to read, right? And Tantra especially, Hinduism in general, not all schools of Hinduism, there's iconoclastic schools of Hinduism. Iconoclastic, I'm using the word very technically, meaning that are against icons. There's some people, iconoclastic just means against tradition or breaking your independent thinking, like that. I'm meaning it very carefully. So one of our friends described Hinduism, and as some schools of Hinduism, as iconoblastic. I mean, it creates images. It images everything, right? It's a language of imagery is strong. So let's look let's continue our verses here. So that light appeared now in the form of a woman, charming and delightful. She was exceedingly beautiful of limb, a maiden in the freshness of youth. Right. This image is by an artist, Bhuvaneshwari, by an artist named Dr. Arghya, Deepa Arghya, I think is his name. No, yes, Deepa Arghya. You can find his art on Facebook under Art Arghya. He's an incredible artist, mostly doing goddess-themed art, and was great scholarship on Tantra in general, especially Bengali forms of esoteric Tantra. And he puts it into he has a very unique style, right? Some people like his style, I like his style very much. It's not very realistic. It's meant to be highly stylized, but it's full of tantric knowledge and language. It has tremendous meaning. This is describing this painting is describing a scene from later at the end of the Devi Bhagavatam, where the gods go to the higher. Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva go to the highest Mandir, her jeweled isle in heaven, and have a vision of her and have a realization based upon those vision. He's done many paintings on that vision and those themes in the Devi Bhagavatam, right? So it's worthwhile if you want to look at some really interesting art. He has hundreds and hundreds of paintings and very good descriptions. Very often he'll give the Dhyan mantras, the mantras that inspired the painting that he's describing in the painting. So anyways, this one doesn't exactly fit the verses. I'm just trying to, like I said, fold in images of Bhuvaneshwari for our contemplation. So let me get the verse here. Udyapina kucha dvanva Nidditam Bhoja Kunmalam. Udyat Pina Kucha. So we're using this translation on the screen is from Mackenzie Brown, C. Mackenzie Brown, who did the translation and commentary that we're primarily using for the book, for those who are just joining. So it says, her full upraised breast put to shame the swelling buds of the lotus. Her girdle and anklets jingled with clusters of tinkling bells. So this seems, and it's just describing her, she has full upraised breasts. She wears, and she has a girdle, and girdle is a waistband here, and anklets of tinkling bells. So we could just move on from that, right? But once again, searching for meaning and seeing what's being described here, a lot is being described here. And it's using some language that of simile, right? Sanskrit poetics, right? And aesthetics that are, it's its own language that in the Western tradition we have, like I said, we have a different language and different poetic. If you ever read the Sandur Lahari of Shankaracharya, attributed to Shankaracharya, that you really see extremely elaborate descriptions and poetical descriptions and similes of the goddess's beauty, full of spiritual meaning, but extremely high Sanskrit poetics. This is very simple, but you could see it's like her breasts put to shame the swelling buds of lotuses. Right, so that's using cultural triggers, right, of poetry and of poetry, so we can investigate a little bit. Udyat means rising, right? Pina means full, swollen, round, right? It's describing, these are descriptions of kucha means breast, female breasts specifically, and then it says dvandva ninditam Bhoja Kudmalam. Dvantva Ninditam means they're fighting, right? What are they fighting? They're fighting the swelling buds of lotuses, right? A budding lotus, not just open, still a bud, but about to open, right? Because that is considered a very beautiful symbol. Right, the lotus has tremendous symbolism and poetic use in Hinduism and India in general, right? But the two breasts are competing with. This is where you get a unique style of poetry that we're not so accustomed to. Maybe we're not accustomed to, right? They're competing with lotuses, budding lotuses, for beauty, right? And for Kunmala means budding, full-blown lotuses, right? So they're for Bhoja. They're competing. Bhoja, here it says Bhoja Kunmalam. Bhoja means enjoyment, right? So what's more enjoyable, right? Who in the competition of what's more beautiful, what's more poetic, what's more auspicious, they're competing for the top position between Ma's upraised breasts and lotuses. Let's look at, I have a picture of some lotuses here, right? This picture here, the close of that's a budding lotus. That's what her breasts are being compared to. But the lotuses are losing, right? The beauty of a lotus, a budding, a full budded lotus about to bloom is loses in the competition, right? Puts to shame. He worded it put to shame, right? In comparison, the lotus is the supreme symbol of beauty and spirituality and of potential, something about to bloom, right? But when the lotus, which is the envy of all flowers, the envy of all symbols, when the lotus sees Ma's breasts, this is the way the poetry works, right? Right. It says, in comparison, I'm nothing. It's so beautiful, right? That who am I competing? I'm ashamed. And there's a lot of that this type of poetic language. I'm remembering in the Chaitanya chart, Chaitanya Mangala, maybe it's there. a book on Lord Chaitanya, who describes that because Lord Chaitanya is born on the full moon, right? He's born on a full moon night. And it said when the moon, which is the most beautiful face, sees the beautiful face of Lord Chaitanya, right? Purna, the moon-like face, he gets ashamed of how ugly he is compared to how beautiful Chaitanya is. And he covers his face in shame. And that's called an eclipse, right? So Lord Chaitanya is born on during the eclipse full moon, right? So that's a beautiful way of saying why there's an eclipse on Chaitanya's birthday. But it's that same type of language. It puts to shame, that type of comparison. We don't. I mean, we have a different category of poetry, but and then it says Ratna Kinkini Kajala Sinjam Manjira Mekkalam. Right. Ranat means sound, giving sound. Kinkini. So you'll see a lot of these. You see, there's a little bit of alliteration and rhyming. Kinkini almost sounds like jingling bells. It has that. These sounds will have these repetitive sounds like that are meant to reflect what they're describing also, right? So kinkini means tinkling bell, and even has that king kind of tinkling sound alliteration in it, right? So tinkling. So ranat kinkini kajala. Actually, Swamiji was looking. We were studying. It seems to be like running water, or a little like that. So almost like the tinkling bells could be like. Remember, this is highly poetic, symbolic language, metaphoric language, like almost like running water. That sound of bells and water and like this, right? And then sinjan means jingling, right? So what's jingling? It says manjira. Manjira is her means manjira means anklets, ankle. I guess ankle. I want to say ankle bracelets, but I guess like we get anklets, right? Anklets are manjira, and then mekkalam. Mekkalam means a girdle. Ma Kali has a girdle made of the severed hands of demons, that's described as mekkalam, right? So that mekkalam is, so the girdles are very interesting. So let's go through a few of these, describe a little bit, right? By describing upraised breasts that put to shame swelling buds of lotuses, this is both the emphasis of breasts is highly maternal, right? Whenever you see this, especially in goddesses, right, is meant to show extreme motherhood qualities, right? Maternal, right? And fertility, right? And it's also a sign of, in Sanskrit poetics, of attractiveness, right? Of course, there's many different standards of attractiveness, and everybody has their own standard of attractiveness. This is pulling from a known reservoir of Sanskrit poetry, Indian poetry, right? Full upraised breasts, putting to shame swelling lotuses, growing lotus, about to open, which means young. In other words of saying she has young breasts. This is a poetic. You have to take all things together to see what's actually being said. This is a description of a young woman's breath. In the previous verses, a maiden in the freshness of youth. Freshness of youth means she is around 16. That phrase in Sanskrit usually refers to like this Sodashi age, around 15, 16, 17 years old, at the blooming of womanhood, right? So that's describing in this poetic language. Full upraised breasts, put to shame, blooming lotuses means a young woman's breath, which is maternal, feminine, attractive, young. Young here means with a lot of potential, because goddess is not young, she's eternal, right? And maternal. The potential is also for maternal potential. She is a mother, right? And a comparison, of course, to the lotus. And we'll see many times in these next verses, her breasts are compared to lotuses. Her eyes are compared to lotuses. Her, again and again, things are going to be compared to lotuses, right? Her lotus-like, and we hear her lotus-like. Somebody the other day, just yesterday, yes, day before yesterday, somebody was here. on Sunday, whenever, I guess, anyway, today's Wednesday. On Sunday, there was a gentleman here, and he says, Swamiji, can I ask you a question? He goes, sure. He says, so Shiva is described as having lotus feet. Why are they lotus feet? And I was like, well, because I like 5 different times I answered, and I said, I have no idea why they're lotus feet. I have to think about this, right? Because I even write letters to my guru. Your lotus-like feet, please accept my pranams at your lotus-like feet, to which I pray to be, these poetic, introductory, devotional salutations that we traditionally do, right? It's like lotus-like feet. So we have to think. Lotus has many, many meanings, right? Of course, Shiva stands on a lotus, holds a lotus. You can do all these type of things. There's lots of lotus, but why specifically lotus? Usually because he stands on a lotus, but there may be deeper meaning. So, lotus, as we learning, as we probably realize, is highly used in Indian aesthetics and highly meaningful in Hinduism. Not just Hinduism, in Buddhism. Buddhism, Jainism, most Indian religions have a lot of lotus symbolism. Simply, you could say we can start listing things that the lotus represent. It represents beauty, it represents fertility, it represents prosperity, it represents spirituality, and it represents eternity. Right. So you can see and not sometimes, of course, we have to figure in use where it's going to fit, right? But usually these are the classic markers: beauty, fertility, prosperity, spirituality, and eternality, right? The symbols of the lotus, right? Many deities hold a lotus, stand on a lotus, are born from a lotus, sit on a lotus, right? Are described as lotus-like qualities again and again. Now, there is one of the powerful one of the reasons that lotuses are such a powerful symbol. For starters, they're extremely beautiful. There's no doubt. If you've ever seen a live lotus flower, and we get them very rarely here. They don't. I mean, some people try to grow them, but we get them from India sometimes for special pujas. People send them to special flower shops that have the license to bring rare plants from India, and they come closed, right? And then it's so interesting. Usually Usha is very good at this, because that's when Usha goes to Dakshineshwar, I'll tell you a little detail. When she goes in Dakshineshwar, she's lucky by Ma's grace. She usually gets to go inside the inner shrine. Presidents of India don't go to the inner shrine. There's a unique opportunity because their connection there. And when we all go, we bring a basket of flowers and garlands and sweets and incense, and the priest will offer and bring it back. But what she always makes sure is she finds a shop that has closed lotuses to offer, right? And the reason she does that, Cocoa Ma loves lotuses. It describes it. She's a Kamala Priya, one of Ma Kali's names. She loves lotus flowers, right? So she, just for that reason. But she knows that what they'll do, the priest will hand her the lotuses from the basket and says, open them, because they know she knows that. And then she slowly peels the flower petals back, the outer lids, and brings them out. And that gives her, she says, more time in the inner shrine. Because if she can go in and out in 30 seconds, or you can spend time to open each flower to offer, right? And so when we get them here, she showed us how to do it. It's so interesting. You begin to peel them open, and how beautiful they open up. A great symbol of the blooming spiritual life, or your blooming heart, or your opening life and love, and like awakening consciousness, like this. A very, very great symbol. Lotuses are an aquatic plant, where they grow in mud and grub. They grow in the mud of a lake or a pond, right? On dirty water, in muddy, scummy water, and their leaves spread on the outside of their roots go into the mud. And their leaves spread on the outside of this dirty water or muddy water, right? But then from that mud and water comes, usually they can even come right at the top of the water. They'll raise 6-7 inches sometimes. They'll come out of the water, right, and then open, right? And when they open, they're so beautiful. They have a quality that they're waterproof. And they have some waxy quality to the leaves, that water, they don't stay wet, even though they're born and live in water. And even though they came out of muddy water, right, they stay clean, right? That's what the beauty. It's another. You can see so many potential for spiritual symbolism, right? Of being born in the world, or being born in the physical body, or whatever we think, however we want to do it, and then from that something divine is born, right? But also our real spiritual nature is untouched by the world, unsullied by the world. You can see that it would lend itself to a very powerful symbol, right? Right. So it's one of the reasons that the we'll see lotus symbolism throughout, right? To the girdle, just a quick mention on the girdle. The girdle, girdling, I think we like gird up your loins or something like that. You know, it's like we use that like having focus and control, right? And there is a ceremony done at the Upanaya, when the sacred thread ceremony is done in traditional culture to little young boys. When they get their sacred thread, they also get a girdle made of munja grass, which is a holy grass, right? Munja girdle. That is because now they're not just little boys anymore. Now they have to be adults. They have to enter the adult world of study, a study of the Vedas, and along with the study of the Vedas comes a lot of restriction, a lot of self-discipline, right? So the girdling is a symbol of control and of discipline, of self-discipline and self-control, right? The munja gets made out of munja grass there because munja grass is a symbol of purity and purification. And so it's designed to keep the pranas moving upward for a young boy's celibate studenthood, you know, so that's part of that purpose. Not exactly a chastity belt, but a chastity inspiring belt, you know. It's designed for that purity. For the goddess is different. Hers is that of tinkling bells, right? And tinkling bells also her anklets, right? Her the manjira. And Ma Kali at Kali Mandir has little tinkling, she has anklets, right? And that's going to be a quality. Not many gods will also, Krishna will also, I think, wear his anklets with bells on them, right? Dancers will wear anklets with bells on them, right? Dancers that wear anklets with bells on them, part of their initiation, not initiation, their graduation, a young in traditional dance culture, Bharatanatyam and Odissi dance like this. After many years of study, they do their first public dance. I'm forgetting the name right now. Arangam or something like that. It's called. One of the girls that grew up at Kali Mandir, you know, before she was even born, she was at Kali Mandir. Recently came to Kali Mandir. Before her last Saturday was her big performance, right? All her family and friends, they were at the studio, get musicians, and she does an hour long or an hour and a half long dance performance to show that she's now qualified to enter the real stage. She probably won't become a professional dancer, right? Just part of her culture, right? But a professional dancer studies 12, 13 years before they're allowed on stage to perform. They have to master something. And when they master it and they show that they've mastered it, and their coming out party, they're I guess in music school and things like that, we had our recital, our senior recital or something where you, part of graduation from music school, we do the same thing here, right? They bring to the temple their ankle bells, right? And you very often, the way for the dancers, they're often in a leather kind of like cuff or like sock or a thing that goes around, ties around the waist, often with leather. And usually we don't bring leather in the temple, and we wouldn't touch the shrine with leather. But we break the rules for this. This will actually touch Ma's feet, which was the ankle bells, right? And also anything that touches Ma's prasadam, we would never touch our feet, right? That you know, and prasad we never give prasad. Like if somebody offers socks to Ma, we wouldn't give them as prasad, because we put our prasad, we put them to our feet. That could be a great offense. The exception again is ankle bells, right? Because Ma wears ankle bells, and when we dance, when these girls dance, when boys or girls dance for Ma, they embody her. It's her dancing, right? So ankle bells are one of the major characteristics of the goddess. Bhuvaneshwari and other goddesses will have ankle bells. So much so that you'll even hear, like that's a common thing. Sri Ramakrishna in the middle of the night at Dakshineshwar, he'd wake up and he'd hear Ma walking through the courtyard. Could he hear Ma from the shrine room? Nobody else saw her, but she'd walk the temple courtyard at night, right? People could hear her ankle bells in the middle of the night. That's that type of devotional experience, right? That's a common thing, that the sound of Ma's ankle bells, her tinkling bells, are the indicator of Ma's presence. They're very auspicious, right? Ma. It also is that means also that this realization, this presentation, this experience of the goddess is not just visual. There's a sound to it, right? They don't just see the goddess, they hear the goddess. And the first thing to hear the goddess is her tinkling ankle bells and her tinkling waist belt. So it's very, very interesting. Let's look at the verses here. Where are we here? Her full upraised breast put to shame the swelling buds of the lotus. Her girdle and anklets jingled with clusters of tinkling bells. So I shall be disciplined, because I totally want to jump into the next verse, but I won't. So we can we go into this, because we can imagine now the next thing will be her necklace, her bracelets, like this, and some her crown. Beautiful things would be described with great meaning. So we didn't get too far. We only got one verse, right? And my idea actually was that the rest of her description could probably be described in one talk, in one meeting. But I wanted to back up and talk about just the nature of the visual experience of her, the iconographic presentation, and the nature of her. Another swipe at nature of her symbolism. I think it's important. But we'll end it. Let's see. Let me double check my notes.
Oh, Guruji?
Yes, Swamiji.
What is that sloka you're talking about? Dancing for Ma. What was that sloka you quoted?
Yes.
The other
I have to make sure. I have to ask Saru again, because she is the one I learned it from. Maybe I'll have Ram Priyadas is going to be in Rochester tomorrow, so maybe he can ask and get the verse from her. Right, I'll text him. But it's something along the lines, right? That when you sing, because she's a dancer and she's a dance teacher, our friend Saru, goddess devotee. When you sing for Ma will come and listen to you. Right. So that's very nice to know. Those of us who sing, I'm a singer, not a professional, but I sing for Ma as part of my spiritual path. I sing for her and sing to her, that she comes and listens, right? But when you dance for her, right, she comes and dances with you. She maybe dances with you or dances as you. It's not clear. That's the thing I need to find out what the verse really meant. So they're very, very special about that. So as a result, we're very, like I said, we're very tolerant of the dancing bells, the ankle bells for dancers. And most of these girls and boys also, although generally most dancers, Indian tradition, Bharatanatyam, like that, are probably, I imagine, about 80% are female, right? When they do their big performance, their big performance on stage in front of their family and friends, right? That's for their family and friends. That's to show what they've done, and we can see how much work, how many years of discipline and mastery it takes, right? But before them, they first come to a temple and dance in front of the temple. Dance in front of the deity, in front of Ma, in front of Jagannath, in front of Nataraj, Shiva, right? That's very important. They offer their bells, and then they do their first official dance in a temple for the pleasure of the god or the goddess. And now if that verse is true, then the goddess will dance with them, not just watch. The mood may be there, we want them to see my dance, right? But it may be something more profound than that, and then they'll perform in front of their friends and teachers and their family, like this, to show what they've done, right? We've attended many of these dance performances, not in a very long time. In the early years, we used to attend more, but still here at Kali Mandir, like I said, just last weekend, the offering was done for Ma. I don't know, we've probably done 1,000 over the years, hundreds at least, maybe not 1,000, but hundreds and hundreds of, which is so beautiful actually, that tradition. We were talking because Nandita, I think Nandita Behara, I think is her name, the teacher of the girl that danced here, who danced here, right? She's been teaching. She teaches Odissi dance. That's one of the form of dancing in Puri, Orissa. It's a little different than the Bharatanatyam that many people have probably seen, South Indian style. It's a different temple dance tradition, right? But hundreds and hundreds of people have learned dancing from her, right? Nusha was saying you should win a cultural award, right? And I'll vouch for the award, right? For keeping a huge part of our Indian and Hindu culture alive through this dance. Like you said, most of the girls some became professional dancers, right? Most is just a way of living and experiencing an important part of their culture. And along with it, not only the devotion of music and dancing for God and all the discipline, right? But it's respect of parents, respect of the guru-disciple relationship. So many things are and all the stories of Hinduism, the gods and goddesses that they have to learn all the stories in order to dance the stories, to tell the stories, right? You see how incredibly important it is. One of the most inspiring things I think that happened at Kali Mandir culturally, just for the passing on of culture. At least this part of the culture will continue, as so many things that get lost through, living Indian culture and Hindu culture in a non-Indian, non-Hindu land, right? That many things get lost. But this is something beautiful. Jai Ma, Jai Ma. Any comments or questions, discussions? Om.
Guruji?
Krishna Tetra, tell me.
Jai Guruji. Thank you very much for your class and explaining the poesy, the poetic symbolism. Something I've been thinking about for a while, and yeah, sometimes hearing that lotus feet type thing. Well, anyways, yeah, it really explains that deeper level. So I really appreciate that. And from the Chaitanya Bhagavat, I was listening to that during the break, and I really couldn't appreciate some of the poetic aspects of it. And it definitely takes your breakdown to appreciate that. So thank you so much. And I just got two questions here. One of them is regarding, you mentioned just now about Sri Ramakrishna hearing Ma's ankle bells, and you said it was in the middle of the night. And as I'm kind of a night owl per se, I'm not that by nature since I was young. And I prefer doing sadhana. I mean, I like Brahma Muhurta and all, but by nature I do it at midnight. So I'm curious, what time did Sri Ramakrishna hear Ma's ankle bells dancing through the courtyard?
I don't know. I mean, Ma's time is midnight, right?
Midnight. Okay.
There's different. I mean that mean that's when he saw, or when he heard, but different deities have special times, right? And so Kali, especially, her time is midnight, and many of her special sadhanas are done at midnight, right? And midnight isn't always 12 midnight. Midnight is the midpoint between sunset and sunrise, right? So right now, probably I think midnight's probably around 12:30 at night, 12:35 or something like that. Proper midnight, just like proper noon is not always noon. It's only noon a couple of days a year, right? It's the time between sunrise and sunset. If you have an app for there's that GCal app, that the Vaishnava app for when to do your sandhya. You give it where you are, and it tells you when the noon, when sunrise is, when sunset is, and when noon is. Right, you can see, and noon changes if you want to do sadhanas at noon, for instance, a noon Gayatri, right? Usually, as far as I remember, right, if you have that app, the opposite is almost like if it's 6. Not always, that's not always the case. But anyway, you can use that to figure out when proper sunrise and sunset is, and then try to figure out when the proper midnight is for special sadhanas for Kali. In the Kapura Stotram, I think it's Kapura Stotram, a very esoteric text for God, for Kali worship, it describes that her sadhanas are done at midnight, right? And then the commentary on that symbolic commentary, what that means is midnight means a couple things. It means in between sun and moon, between night and day, right? So midnight there means in the Sushumna, neither Ida nor Pinda, neither day nor night, and midnight is in the middle point. So that's sometimes symbolic of that also. But also the period of midnight, the actual time at midnight, is the external in time manifestation of that inner reality of the Sushumna, right? So that's a time when the midnight, sunrise, sunset, and proper noon is the pranas are automatically in Sushumna. So there may be something like that, and even maybe the sounds also come from that. Who knows how to understand that? But I don't remember exactly. I'm remembering various people's experience, including Sri Ramakrishna's descriptions of seeing her or hearing her like this. But I don't remember exactly what time. But in my mind, if it's not midnight, it should have been midnight, because that's like the time. And also Dakshineshwar at night is very special when the crowds leave. I've never been there the whole night. Swami Ambikananda has been there on one of the because they do special like Shama Kali Puja, Vartanta Kali Puja, Falaharni Kali, the three main Kali Pujas of the year. These are night pujas. They start around 10 o'clock at night and go to 2 in the morning. It's over that midnight period. Swamiji, do you remember anything that Thakur is hearing, or I don't details I don't remember.
No. Yeah. I don't remember any of the details about like when exactly he heard it.
Yeah, but midnight's a good time for sadhana if you're up, And
okay, perfect.
So is Brahma Muhurta, but it's I think our lifestyle sometime midnight is. I remember there's a funny story. Bada Haridas, the old type of president here in Laguna, he was on his Laguna Beach, walking from his apartment, we a block away from the temple they rented, and walking to Mangalarati in the dark, 3:30, 4:30, and 4 in the morning, walking to wake up the deities and work like that. And he's passing somebody in the alley coming from, Laguna Beach is a nightlife spot, also has bars and clubs and things like that, right? And so somebody's walking by, and the person walks by and says, "Good evening," or good night. And he says, "Good morning." They pass each other. And then what a different consciousness. One's waking up to go worship, one's finishing his night at partying and coming back home. But also I think that's also the midnight in between these two points, But
Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you so much, Guruji.
Oh, you have the second question.
Kind of a quick one. In regards to just thinking back to the previous verses and all of the rishis and sages doing their sadhana, I'm kind of curious in terms of Ganeshaji and how he's really the doorkeeper to Mother Parvati. And I remember you mentioning and Podbean lecture of Ganeshaji's appearance day, of how another Purana, he appeared from the bubbles of Lalita Tripura Sundari. And but in terms of Bhuvaneshwari, in this text and the Devi Gita, is Ganeshaji involved at all? Or
in the Devi Gita, I don't think he's mentioned, but he is mentioned in the Devi Bhagavatam, the larger text, the full text there is. And actually very often there's a term that gets used, Durga, the mother of Ganesha, right? So there's a, actually I was interesting you bring this up, because I was thinking it's not directly part of Devi Gita, right? But whether or not to bring it up as we were approaching, whether there's a place to bring it up, there's very unique tantric ontology of Bhuvaneshwari in the Devi Bhagavatam, where Ma Bhuvaneshwari appears in 5 primary forms, one of which is Durga, the mother of Ganesha. Very specifically, she appears as Radha, she appears as Saraswati. There's a very, which I've never found this particular collection. I have to refresh my mind a little bit. a long time ago, I worked on it and tried to organize it and put it into a chart. It was a little complicated because we're not accustomed to it. But Ganesh, the stories of, I don't remember if the story of Ganesh is directly just like about his birth, but he's mentioned, I remember that line, that Durga, the mother of Ganesha, meaning Parvati, that Durga is identified with Parvati as one of the Shaktis of Bhuvaneshwari, right, mentioned, right, in the unique kind of ontology of the Devi Bhagavatam. But I'll have to, it came in my mind today and yesterday. So maybe you asking the question will reinforce me looking a little bit more. Because the Devi Bhagavatam is 18,000 verses, so it's easy to get lost and forget something. I think I read that years ago and I don't remember it and where it is. And so I have to search it again, but it was inspired in my mind even today. So I'll look a little more. Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much, Guruji. I really appreciate that.
Anything else? Om, om, om. I was all excited to talk about Ma's earrings, but we're not there yet. Ma has very beautiful earrings. All right, I guess that if there's no your last chance. Not last chance. You have another chance next week. Good. All right, dear ones. So tomorrow, remember tomorrow is Tulsidas Jayanti. So if you read the Tulsidas Ramayana or at least chant Hanuman Chalisa, it'll be very nice. It's a very beautiful, and remember he is such an important personality, and really North India is what it is partially because the Hinduism we have now in North India especially is largely because of the influence of Tulsidas, right? His influence can't be ignored, and our understanding of devotion, so much comes from him. Sri Ramakrishna quoted him very often. So Jai Ma. All right. There we got here. I'm going to change views so I can see people here. Jai Ma, Makoto, Jai Ma. Durgadasi, Giriji, Namaskar, Jai Ma. Akbaram, nice to see you. Jai Ma, Shelby. Yes, my Jai Ma, everyone's here. Shweta, Ashley, we don't see, but we know you're there. Nanda, we don't see, but we know he's there. All right. Until next Wednesday. Jai Ma. Be well. Shri Guru Maharaj ki jai, Mahamaya ki jai, Swamiji Maharaj ki jai, Bhuvaneshwari Devi ki jai, Tulsidas Maharaj ki jai, Ma Dakshineshwari Bhavatarani Dakshina Kali ki jai. Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om.